You know, you probably use the word can or ability dozens of times a day. I can do that. Hey, can you help me? But have you ever stopped to think about what we actually mean when we talk about ability? I mean, it seems like the simplest thing in the world, right? Well, it turns out this simple little word unlocks a massive philosophical puzzle, one with huge implications for how we see ourselves and the world around us. I mean, just think about it. I can tie my shoes. She's able to run a marathon. Hey, can you pass the salt? Our entire world, our whole day, is kind of built on this seemingly straightforward idea. You know, it's so fundamental that most of the time, we don't even notice we're using the concept at all. And wow, the range here is just incredible. You've got abilities that are so common, we totally take them for granted, like being able to write your own name. And then you've got these other ones that are just mind-blowingly rare, like having the ability to hit a 100-mile-an-hour fastball. We recognize both as abilities, but they feel like they're from different planets, don't they? So this brings us right to the core puzzle. When we say someone has the ability to do something, what are we actually saying about them and about the world? Is it something about their training, their physical makeup, or is it just about the opportunities they have? What's the secret ingredient? And believe me, this isn't just some abstract word game. The search for a clear answer here, it actually forces us to confront some of the deepest questions out there. Questions about potential, about freedom, and really about the very nature of what it means to be a person who acts in the world. Okay, so to get a real handle on this, we need to do what philosophers do best. We got to draw some important distinctions. Let's start by peeling back the layers and separating ability from a few similar concepts to see what makes it unique. So let's start with the biggest, broadest category of all, power. In this sense, power is just a general term for all the possibilities that are inherent in, well, in everything. A glass has the power to be fragile. The sun has the power to rise. It's the most general concept of potential you can imagine. Okay, so from that huge category of power, we can narrow it down to something called a disposition. Think about a glass being fragile. That fragility is a property the glass has all the time, even if it never, ever actually breaks. The disposition is there, it's just kind of waiting in the wings for the right conditions to pop up. And that finally brings us to ability. Now, an ability is a really specific kind of power, and it seems to have two key ingredients. First, it has to belong to an agent. You know, a person, an animal, something that acts. And second, it has to relate that agent to a particular action. And check this out, because this distinction is super important. The power to understand French isn't really an ability in this strict sense. It's more of a passive thing, a state of knowing. But the power to speak French? Now that's an action. And that's what makes it a genuine ability. Okay, and there's one last really crucial distinction we need to make. Think about a trained tennis player. When she's miles from a court without a racket or a ball, she still has the general ability to serve. I mean, the training, the muscle memory, it's all there, right? But put that same player on the court, racket in hand, ball ready to go. Now she has the specific ability to serve. She's got the opportunity and the means to act right here and now. Remember this difference, because it's going to be really important in a minute. All right, so now that we've got our terms straight, let's look at the first major attempt to pin down what an ability really is. It's called the conditional analysis, and it's a simple, super intuitive idea. You have an ability if you would succeed if you tried to do it. So to put it a little more formally, the idea is this. A person, let's call her S, has the ability to do an action A if and only if S would do A if S tried to do A. See? It's a direct link between ability, trying, and success. It feels clean, it feels simple, and for a lot of cases, it seems to work just fine. But is it really that simple? Of course not. This is philosophy, after all. And if there's one thing philosophy is good at, it's finding the little cracks in simple ideas. So let's look at a couple of famous thought experiments that cause some big problems for this if you try test. All right, here's problem number one, a classic from philosopher Keith Learer. Picture this. Someone has a deep pathological phobia of red candy. Now here's the kicker. It's totally true that if this person tried to eat a red candy, they would succeed. There's nothing physically stopping them. The problem is, the very nature of their phobia means they are psychologically incapable of even trying to begin with. So the if you try test says they have the ability, but our intuition just screams no they don't. The test is giving us the wrong answer here. Okay, now let's flip it around and look at the problem from the other direction. Think about an expert golfer. She steps up to an easy putt, she tries to make it, and misses. It happens. Now let's apply our rule.
Is it true that she would have made the putt if she tried? Well, no, because she did try and she failed. The rule forces us to say she didn't have the ability. But that feels totally wrong, right? Of course she had the ability. She's an expert. She just happened to fail that one time.
So yeah, the if you try test has some pretty big holes in it. Philosophers needed a new approach. The next big idea is called the modal analysis, and it gets rid of trying altogether. Instead, it focuses on a different concept: what's possible. To get our heads around this, we need to think a little bit about alternate realities, or what philosophers call possible worlds.
So the core idea here is actually pretty simple. To have an ability just means it's possible for you to perform the action. Maybe not in this exact world at this exact second, but in some relevant, very similar possible world. So let's go back to our golfer. Even though she missed the putt in our world, there are countless nearly identical worlds where she sinks it. Because that success is possible, this theory says she has the ability. See how that works?
But, surprise, surprise, this view runs into its own bizarre puzzles, and these were famously pointed out by the philosopher Anthony Kenny. First, there's the lucky shot. Imagine an absolutely terrible darts player hits a bullseye by a complete and utter fluke. Well, since he did it in this world, it was clearly possible. So the modal analysis has to conclude he has the ability. But our intuition says no way, a fluke is not an ability. The theory gets it wrong. And then there's a tricky card puzzle. I have the ability to pick a card that's either red or black, right? But I don't have the ability to pick a red card on command, nor the ability to pick a black card on command. It seems like the logic of what's possible just doesn't quite map onto the logic of what we call an ability.
Now, you might be thinking, okay, phobias, golfers, card tricks, this is all very abstract. And you're right. But the reason philosophers obsess over this puzzle is that how we define ability has massive, real-world consequences. Let's look at two huge areas where this really matters.
First up, the free will debate. The entire argument might just hinge on this. See, compatibilists who think free will and a deterministic universe can coexist often use a version of that if you try test. They say you're free because you would have done otherwise if you'd chosen to. But incompatibilists fire back, leaning more on the possibility idea. They argue that if the universe is deterministic, no other action is genuinely possible, which means you never really had the ability to do otherwise in the first place.
And this next one is just as profound: how we understand disability. If a disability is defined as the lack of an ability, then our whole theory of ability directly shapes that conversation. A naturalistic view says a disability is lacking a species normal ability, like the ability to see. But an evaluative view argues it's about lacking an ability that's considered ethically or socially important for a good life. And trust me, this isn't just a word game. It leads to totally different approaches to justice, accessibility, and human rights.
So you see, the crucial point is that this is not just some abstract philosophical navel-gazing. How we decide to define this one simple word, ability, has a direct line to how we structure our legal systems, our ethical theories, and our social policies. It helps determine who we hold responsible and who we have a duty to support. So, we started with what seemed like a simple question, and we've ended up in this incredible maze. We have the if you try test, which seems to fail with things like phobias and lucky breaks. Then we have the possibility test, which struggles with its own set of paradoxes. And we've seen that the stakes of getting this right, from free will to disability justice, well, they couldn't be higher.
And that leaves us with one last big thought. We live our lives constantly assessing our own abilities and the abilities of everyone around us. Yet the concept itself remains deeply mysterious and full of puzzles. So if something so fundamental to how we see ourselves is this difficult to pin down, what does that say about our true potential?